ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। श्री स्वामीनारायण भगवाननी जय। अक्षर पुरुषोत्तम महाराजनी जय। गुरु हरि प्रमुख स्वामी महाराजनी जय। In the divine presence of Bhagavan Swaminarayan, in the equally divine presence of my Guru Hari Pramukh Swami Maharaj, in the revered presence of saints, the organizers, and all the people who have come here to listen with such deep faith, and also in the presence of some of the people who over the years have come to become deep friends and who have made a difference to my life. So once again, I would like to repeat what I had said, and you reminded me. We really feel comfortable at this place, and it is straight from our heart. I really didn't want to start like this. But sometimes you have to start the way God wants you to start. And I believe that I want to congratulate the organizers for exploring empowering relationships as a topic for Indian wisdom, to celebrate the 100th week of AMA, because it is the need of the hour. Relationships, they have the power to paint your world either with gold or with gloom. I also believe that relationships have the power to add value to your life and make our lives worthwhile. Suppose you are made into a king. You may not agree, but let's just suppose. Nobody stops us. Suppose you are made into a king, the emperor of the earth. But then you are asked that you should live in the desert of Sahara with nobody around. Now imagine, you are an emperor of the earth in the Sahara desert with nobody around. That means nobody to talk to, nobody to walk with, nobody to rule over, nobody to respect you, and nobody to relate to. With nobody around, even an emperor becomes a nobody. Hardly do we realize that it is everybody around you that makes you somebody. Sometimes we get into this mode and think that because of me, everybody is. But because of everybody, you are. We have no choice. We have to relate. And as I had said, that relationship is the need of the hour. Let's go back to history, and I'll take you through history in just 1 minute. Man was in the caves, in total isolation. He was totally unaware of the earth. I'm talking about the caveman. Isolation. Then with technology, we became connected. We started living in connection. And now we feel we own the earth. See the difference? From zero connection, we felt we were nobody. Didn't know about the earth. With total connection, we feel we own the earth. Now the need of the hour is how do we relate, because we are connected. We have no choice now. You have to pick up those phones. If you don't, they get hurt. You have to answer back if somebody sends a message. Now people have a habit of saying, I sent you a message, I'm here. You never read the message. You didn't get a chance to tell him no. They send a message, they're here. Because of connection, we are forced into relationships, whether we like it or not. So today, from isolation to connection, we live in an age of relations. How we relate to people, our friends, countries, cultures, races, even enemies. All these relations make a difference and they are important. But if I were to ask the entire audience, I'm not going to ask, but if I were, that would be very embarrassing. Never ask questions in public. You don't know what you'll get back. I remember when I was in England, and there was a BBC newscaster, and there was a strike, miners' strike in Northumberland. And the reporter was, there was a background, all these miners in their hat, they were supposed to go down, they were striking, they didn't want to do mining. So the reporter is saying, yes, to the people out there, there's a huge strike going on. All the people have decided to refuse and not go into the mining. And we have so many. I'll just pick out one simple miner and ask him. He said, excuse me, are you a miner? He said, yes. He said, your name? He said, Joe. He said, well, Joe, why are you striking? He said, are we? He said, Joe, I think you are striking. He said, strike whom? He didn't even know what was going on. So the reporter said, cut, don't take it, but he was already in the air. So I'm asking, if I were to ask, which I'm not, but if I were to ask you, that do you know that relationships are important? I believe everybody would say, Swamiji, we know relationships are important. But our biggest problem is we don't know how to work them. We know they're important, but we don't know how to work them. An example will help me serve to drive my point through. Suppose you have a beautiful picture hanging in your living room about Mount Everest. We love it, but we also know we can't climb it. Suppose somebody has a beautiful picture of the deep oceans in his living room. We love it, but we also know we can't swim it. So many people in this world, they have beautiful pictures of the moon. We romanticize about it, but we know we can't live there. It's too hostile. So in our album of our mind, we have some beautiful pictures of people we love. Our friends, our family, our strangers, celebrities. Beautiful pictures of people we love. But our problem is we can't relate to the people we love. Today I have come here to explain to you how that is possible through another dimensional relationship. It's very important we understand this thing. And when we understand it, we'll find out that there is a way of transcending to get deep down into it. It's a very amazing concept. Because, yes, relating to a brother, we do it every day. We try. To our wife, we try harder. But continue, someday, right at the end of your life, you'll realize that you could have tried harder. It's always there. We find a way to get through. But as we move ahead from all the relationships that we have on this earth, perhaps the most glorified, most celebrated relationship is between mother and child. It is considered benign, selfless. But there is a relationship that even transcends that relationship. When Alexander the Great, he was asked that, who do you love more? Your father, Philip of Macedonia, who made you king? Or your guru, Aristotle? Alexander the Great said, I love my father because he brought me from heaven to earth. But I love my guru more because only he can take me from brings me to my topic that the Guru-Shishya relationship is a sublime relationship. Perhaps all other relationships, they are good. Nothing wrong. We should celebrate them. But they are all limited to this earth, to this body, to your mind, full of limitations. Guru-Shishya relationship is the only relationship that can transcend and take you beyond this earth. That can take you beyond your own body. They can take you beyond your ego, beyond your mind. It has the power of sublimation. And that is one of the reasons we should understand that this relationship can take you places where you cannot even dream of. But honestly, this is the AMA. Nothing wrong. But I don't believe that everybody present in this audience believes in a guru. And I'm not a fanatic person. I respect everybody's rights and everybody's experience. That's what Hindu culture teaches us. It is a culture where there is no conflict if one field believes that God is a form and the other field believes God has no form. We are happy. As long as your God makes you good, we are happy. It's most important. So, maybe many people in the audience, some may believe that Guru is necessary. Some believe Guru is not necessary. I am not here to tell you the need of a Guru, no. I'm not even here to force you to accept my belief in a Guru, no. I respect your beliefs. But I am here to tell you that if you even think of the sublime bonds of Guru-Shishya relationship, it has the power to enhance all your relationships on this earth. There are no relationship that can communicate this power. If you have a great relationship with your brother, that doesn't mean you'll have a great relationship with your wife. If you have a great relationship with your wife, that doesn't mean you will always have a great relationship with your boss. But in the Guru-Shishya relationship, how it's affecting everybody is if you have a great relationship with a higher, superior knowledge, it's going to make you great. And because you are at the center of all your relationship, I guarantee it's going to help you improve all your relationships throughout your life. That's the reason why Guru-Shishya relationship has that power of sublimation. But as Mukesh Bhai said, that this relationship is perhaps India's priceless gift to world culture. No other culture has come up with this idea of Guru-Shishya relationship. It's borrowed. It's explored by other people. And now we have a word that everybody or anybody who inspires you or teaches you is a guru. You don't need a spiritual guru. Your mother could be your first guru, your father. The person who gives you a name is a guru. The teacher who teaches you is a guru. Even a stray dog who gives you an inspiration is a guru. Dattatreya is reputed to have made 24 gurus. He took inspiration even from dirt and even from a coal girl. Inspirations can come from any place, and if you are open to inspiration, you are a Shishya all your life. And if you are open to get inspiration, you can make anybody into your guru. But I am limiting myself to a spiritual because it's a sublime bond of Guru-Shishya relationship. And this concept has been given by Indian wisdom to the world at large. It's so easy for us to say we have made it, and our patent is already there in the name of the Upanishads. You know, the ocean of Indian wisdom are the Upanishads. In Sanskrit, the Upanishad means up vatta ni vatta shad. The meaning is sitting near. Clearly, it is even our Upanishad that the spiritual knowledge you will get, it is always from a guru. When you sit near a guru, it's talking about physical sitting near a guru, mental sitting near a guru. The moment you sit near, there is a transmission of knowledge. Nearness gives knowledge, not just contemplation. When Eklavya was near his guru, through his mind, he got that knowledge. So, sitting near A guru is a must. You know what the difference is here? Western world keeps thinking that I made a discovery, thinking on my own, in my imagination. As I moved ahead, it is a self-discovered process. What the Upanishads say, there are two types of knowledge. One is self-taught, self-thought and self-taught. The other is guru-taught. The self-taught is one man's experience and one man's education. The guru-taught, it's a pool of wisdom of hundreds of gurus down the ages, and that knowledge is a collective consciousness that comes to us. To explain it in simpler terms, Dashrath Patel, who could be considered a maverick in design, we had the great opportunity of sitting with him, and Dashrath Bhai, who didn't believe in God, the founding director of NID, he often used to tell us when we were meeting together in the designing of Akshardham Gandhinagar, he would tell us, Swamiji, by the time I have finished with you, all of you sadhus will become designers. I said, Dashrath Bhai, by the time we have finished with you, you will start believing in somebody. It's very important. But anyway, he often told us that whenever the first batch of NID class students would come to me, he would stand up and say that you are NID students. Of course, you are talented, intelligent, artistic. And you could do great work on your own. But there are two options. If you want to learn the way you want to learn, this is your first year. And if you want to learn the way I teach you, this is your 21st year, because I've been teaching 20 years. So you get all the experience of 20 years. When we sit next to a guru, it is not just one moment, it is eternity compressed into that moment. You become the recipient of eternity in one moment. That's why the Guru-Shishya relationship is eternal. It's beyond time. And when we understand that, we know that it is a world of its own. Mukesh Bhai said that Brahmavihari Swami will carry you away into a different world. So let's begin our journey. The Guru-Shishya relationship is a different world on its own. Adhyatmanand Swami would know what it was to sit in the presence of Chidanand Swami. This world ceases and you are transported into a different world. When we sit next to Pramukh Swami, it's a different world. The rules are different. The feelings are different. The moments are different. I hope I can explain this, and I'm trying to make an effort. It's difficult, but I know, please bear with me. You know, the rules in a Guru-Shishya relationship, they are different. They are not informational, they are transformational. They transform the environment, they transform the being. That's the power of a Guru-Shishya relationship. I'll explain it in a better way. Once a Shishya, he goes up to a Guru and he says, I've come for some knowledge. The Guru doesn't pay much attention to him. He says, here, take this basket. It was not a pag, it was a basket, you know, the woven. And he says, take this basket, go into the river and fill it up with water and bring me some water. The Shishya, knowing that he has to trust the Guru, he goes into the river, puts the basket in, and the moment he lifts the basket out, there are 1,000 holes. So there is no water, it can't be collected. So he's wondering, how do you collect water in a woven basket? But still he collects it and he runs to the Guru. By the time he was hoping that at least a little water must have remained at the end of it, by the time he reaches, there's not a drop of water. The Guru turns, he says, bring me some water. He said, can I bring it in another container? He said, no, in this basket. He goes back, he fills it up. This time he doubles his speed. Maybe if I run faster, there will be some water. He runs back. Second time, third time, fourth time. After 10, 11 times, the Shishya is exasperated. Sometimes that's what the Guru wants. You know, that's what the Guru wants. You know, sometimes if somebody tells me, Swami, this problem doesn't go away, this problem doesn't go away, it's like pushing a wall. You know, When in some exercises they tell you, push a wall, and you push a wall, do you think the wall is ever going to move? But what happens? Your muscles grow. So sometimes problems don't go because your muscles must grow. It's important. So the Guru tells him, fill it with water. That Shishya runs and comes back and says, then he throws the basket and he says, Guru, it's pointless. I can't collect water in this. Then the Guru says, exactly, collecting water was not the point. Cleaning the basket was the point. When you go to a Guru and you say, give me knowledge, fill me up, his first point would be to empty you first. Sometimes it's not gaining, it's losing weight that's more important. And I believe most of the people are more conscious of losing weight than gaining it. So we see that the rules in a Guru-Shishya relationship, the points are different. And when we understand that world, we understand there's a different thing that transmits when you are near to a Guru. Let me take you into that different world. Our relationship is more based on words. Okay? Imagine two people getting together, holding hands for 1 hour sitting in silence. We think that's pretty cold. We think, what's the matter with them? He's not saying anything. We believe that words transmit. That's our world. But in a Guru-Shishya relationship, it is said, Gurostu monam vyakhyanam. Silence does more than words. We know the Upanishadic story of Satyakam Jabali. He goes to his Guru Gautam. And he says that, Guru, give me knowledge. The Guru says nothing and he says, these are 400 cows. Take them to the jungle. Come back to me when there are 1,000. Sunil, you want to try it? Because you are experimental, You experimented all sorts of... 400 cows turning into 1,000. If an intelligent man sat down and started calculating, he'd said, how many years? And some babies, some calves surviving, some not, and all the probabilities and everything would, ruining your mind. But Satyakam doesn't ask. He goes, he stays in the jungles, he serves the cows, he does everything in the jungle, just hoping that the Guru will be kind, Guru will be kind, Guru will be kind. After years, or maybe a decade, when Satyakam Jabali, he comes back to his Guru with 1,000 cows, there is already an illustrious light on his face of Brahmavidya. He has already learned the secrets of the universe, and the Guru said nothing. It's less about words and more about work. It's spiritual work. So the laws in a Guru-Shishya relationship are different, where silence achieves more than words. Okay? The second thing which I believe we should also know, that in our day-to-day relationship, I may be wrong because I have no experience on this, but I may be wrong. Sometimes before people are getting married, they are so happy. No, please wait for it, wait for it. Wait for me, let me please finish. You're far experienced, but let me finish. It's not that bad. I'm telling you something different, Sometimes, because when they come to a sadhu, they say, Swami, give me blessings, I'm going to get married. He's so happy. Their entire picture is rosy, glittering with gold. And even just years after marriage, they found the love of their life. And years after marriage, they're not that happy. First, they don't say it, but we see it. Look, just as you can't fake a laughter, you can fake a smile. But try faking laughter. You can't fake laughter. Similarly, you can't fake misery. It is seen. You can't hide it. It is seen in the way you walk, where you talk, where you move, where you're silent, or where you over-talk. People know. So, I started wondering, and this is my analysis. This is not Guru taught. This is self-taught, so you can reject it, okay? There's nothing to do with the Upanishads. So I started thinking, I said, why does this happen? And the reason I think that before marriage, both the boy and the girl are desperately trying to please each other. Even if you're waiting for, somebody that you love and he or she comes 10 minutes late, you feel no problem. Even if you go really far to meet them, you feel fine, great, adventurous. But what happens after marriage? Before marriage, you are desperately trying to please each other. After marriage, you desire to be pleased by the other. Now you start analyzing your problems. You always say, you always made me wait. Why didn't you wait for me? Why didn't you cook for me? Why? See, we expect that before marriage you have to please your wife. And after marriage you believe your wife has to please you. If you continue with this feeling in trying to please each other, I don't think any marriage will have any problems. In a Guru-Shishya relationship is an eternal feeling of a Shishya trying to please Pramukh Swami. For me, every whisper, every message, anything he says, however small, is like my life and like my world. And even the Guru, many times we have seen Pramukh Swami comes out and he folds his hands. He said, what can I do for you? Even at the age of 92, he still feels that what can I do for everybody? So this eternal feeling of trying to please each other will always preserve your relationships perfectly. But what's happening in the world? That slowly, when husband and wife or brothers, when they are having partnership or working together, there is secret competition. You might not tell me, but when a child is born, there is this secret competition of who does that child listen to me or my wife. It's not the child's fault, but he starts deciding who is better. You know how miserable our state is, okay? Then there's a secret competition who says a better joke. There's a secret competition who is smarter. There's a secret competition who has the last say. And there's an open competition of who is the boss of the house. I'm trying to say, it is sometimes more difficult than India and China talks. Where you're not going to get through. So I'm trying to say, in our day-to-day relationship, earthly relationship, there is always this tinge of competition. There is a tinge of competition. In a Guru-Shishya relationship, they do not compete, they complete. A Guru is always trying to complete. They are together. See the famous prayer? Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karvavahe Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. The Guru and Shishya are praying to the divine God together. Oh God, may we grow together, may we be together, may we be energized together, may we become stronger together. May we be a part of each other. May we not hate or be jealous of each other. The spiritual sublime relationship is where there is no touch of jealousy. Even if a Shishya grows bigger and better in talent, the Guru is happier. With Pramukh Swami, he hardly speaks. He's not a great orator. But you see the way he beams when his Shishya, the smallest kid, begins to speak, the way Pramukh Swami becomes happy. A Guru is happier when his Shishyas sometimes outperform him. That is the relationship that people need. It's very important that relationship is full of silence. It is a relationship which completes and not competes. And it's very important that there was one Guru. Try and understand. There was one Guru. He had about 50, 60 Shishyas and they were living at the foothills of a hill. In the monastery, but what happened? All these 50 Shishyas were very bound. They were spiritual, did good. They were working hard. What happened? That one Shishya, we always have one character who would now and then transgress. He would go down into the village and meet somebody which he was not supposed to meet. That Shishya he would sometimes go down to a movie when, he's a monk and he's not supposed to. He would go down. What happened? It would continue to happen, and then all these Shishyas got upset. So they went down to the Guru and they said, Guruji, we have one monk amongst ourselves who is breaking all the rules. Guru said, why are you worried? He said, no, but because of this monk we are getting a bad name. Guru says, what does he do? He said, he goes down to the movies. He comes late in the monastery. He's not supposed to stay overnight in a village. He stays overnight. He eats things which are restricted as a monk. All the things you would penalize that guy for. And then the Guru asks a second question. He said, what do you want me to do? He said, banish this person. Get rid of him from our ashram. Guru says, why? He says, because he doesn't follow the rules of spirituality. Remember what the Guru asks. Guru says that, do you follow all the rules? They said, yes. Are you so spiritually strong? They said, yes. Do you obey everything I tell you? They said, yes. He said, then all of you can go, let him be with me. Guru is here not to judge us. He is here to complete us. Even in your relationship, don't be judgmental. Try and complete the flow. If you are if you want to sustain those relationships, complete the flow that relationship has. Don't be judgmental. The Guru-Shishya relationship doesn't just end there. In our day-to-day relationship, there is a give and take. You agree with me? There is interest and self-interest. Okay? It's fact. Let's not hide it. Because we are civilized, we use beautiful phrases to hide our weaknesses, Because people like you are so busy, you don't have time for your children. You say, I spend quality time with my son. That's 5 minutes. Don't get misled by all these beautiful phrases that intellectual people invent. Your son wants time. He doesn't know what's quality time. He said, no, because I'm busy, I spend quality time with my son. That's for yourself and that's for your board meetings. That's not what the son wants. So, in this world, our relationships are based on give and take. Interest and self-interest. In the Guru-Shishya relationship, it is based on give and give. Go home and think about this. Is give and give. The Guru gives everything to the Shishya. And the Shishya in return gives everything to the Guru. Where's the trade? We think, you get everything and you give back everything. Where's the trade? My friend, there is no bargaining, there is no trade. It's just you and me and everything. I'll explain with an example. When Ramanujacharya, he went to his Guru. And the Guru says that I am teaching you a secret mantra. Ramanujacharya, as a young sadhu, said, what will this mantra do, Guru? He said, anybody who chants this mantra will go to heaven straight away. He said, fine, wonderful. Before he was leaving, the Guru could understand his footsteps in his mind. He said, wait a minute. He said, but if you reveal this secret mantra, you will go to hell. You have something great and you can't talk about it. It's like a secret. Secrets are very dangerous. It's like if I tell you this is a secret, it's the first thing that will be lost. Because it's something great and you can't talk about it because it's secret. Yeah? So even Krishna Bhagwan laughs there. He said, I am telling you the secret of the universe. If it's secret, why are you telling him? But still, anyway. But that's how it is. And then the whole world knows about that secret, okay? So this gives you the right to tell secrets. No, don't. But I am telling you that here, what happens, the Guru tells Ramanujacharya, this is a mantra, secret mantra. Anybody who chants it will go to heaven. If you reveal it, you'll go to hell. Next morning, Ramanujacharya, young sadhu, he gathers the entire village, he climbs on the roof, and the whole village is chanting this mantra, chanting this mantra. The Guru runs up to me and said, hey, wait a minute. What have you done? He says, what? He said, you will go to hell. Ramanujacharya said, Guruji, what about all these thousands of people? Will they go to heaven? He said, they will. He said, I am ready to go to hell if thousands can go to heaven. The Guru is ready to suffer the toughest trials, provided the people who put faith in him benefit the greatest rewards. This is what Guru-Shishya relationship is. It goes beyond, I believe it's a different ball game, it's a different rules, it's a different world in its own. And that's what we see. When the Guru gives everything to the Shishya, the Shishya even offers his own existence for the Guru. We have Yogiji Maharaj, a great loving saint, who on his every breath in 3 states of his mind, Jagrat, Swapna and Shushupti, kept thinking about his Guru Shastriji Maharaj. Once what happened, because of his bhakti, he had gone down to Bhavnagar. And there were the murtis of God. And there is a system in Bhakti Sampradaya, you offer food. You close the curtains and then you sing Thad. Yogiji Maharaj sang Thad, and to everybody's surprise, when the curtains were opened, God, the murti, had eaten the food from the thalis. This is a huge miracle for a Bhakti Sampradaya people. All the people started gathering and they started, thanking Yogiji Maharaj, started singing his praises. You know what Yogiji Maharaj said? He said, wait a minute, don't tell me, don't thank me. He said, but your bhakti has led God to eat the food. He says, nothing to do with my bhakti. Think who sent me here. My Guru Shastriji Maharaj commanded me to come to Bhavnagar. It is because of his command that God has eaten. Apne to જોઈ લીધું ને આપણું. See, this is us. You know, it is like a story of an ant, like a story of an ant and an elephant. They were walking on a bridge and the bridge started shaking. The ant was the first to announce that together we shook the bridge. Ant and an elephant, everybody knows the bridge shook because of the elephant, but the ant says together, straight on Radio Mirchi, together we shook the bridge today. No. The Shishya offers all his achievements to the Guru. Look at Pramukh Swami. He has built more than 1,000 temples. It's not a simple thing. 1,000. Places like Akshardham, Delhi, Gandhinagar. We are building a beautiful Akshardham in America. In December, a beautiful temple is coming up in LA, right at the center of Chino Hills, which is the epicenter of earthquake. And that temple, everybody wanted to change the venue. Swami said, no, overcome the problems. And it is perhaps the first temple in the history of Hinduism which is being built on titanium and carbon isolators. So even if there's a huge earthquake and there's a shear shift of maybe 9 feet, nothing will happen to the temple. It will remain erect. I am just trying to tell you, but even after building so many temples, whenever we say, Swamiji, you've done a great work in Akshardham, he says, no, because of Yogiji Maharaj's sankalp. We corner him many times. We say, Swami, but Yogiji Maharaj didn't know about LA. Even the water fountain that has been done, we say, Swami, it's a wonderful thing. He said, Yogiji Maharaj's sankalp. And we said, how can that be linked? It's illogical. Then he explained to me. He said, look, Yogiji Maharaj used to always pray, sadhu vado, may sadhus grow. He used to always pray, temples vadhe, mandir vado. He said, in that sankalp, all the temples that are being built are because of his sankalp. All the new sadhus that are coming, because of his sankalp. And he told me, even when man goes to the moon, and there is a first BAPS temple on the moon, it will be because of Yogiji Maharaj's sankalp. He put the flag up there. Just as a guru gives everything to the Shishya, all his achievements the Shishya gives to his guru. So it is a perfect symbiotic relationship of give and give, complete and not compete, the moods of silence. But the fourth, here I want to venture and take a little risk as well. The fourth, I believe, the Guru-Shishya relationship is based, everybody will tell you, and they're not wrong, that relationships are based on love and care. Am I correct? This is a risk, but I believe I should venture it, and you are the judge. I believe relationships don't last because of love and care. I believe relationships last because of truth and trust. If somebody loves you but there's no truth in it, it's hollow. And I have hundreds of children, every day they come to the temple, they say, Swami, my mother loves me, cares about me, but she doesn't trust me. She keeps watch over me. I think mistrust hurts you more than miscare. I believe trust and truth are the footings of love and care. And the ideal swarup of truth and trust can only be found in Guru-Shishya relationship, where the Guru is truthful. Here I'm talking about a genuine Guru. If the Guru lies, then the Shishya does not have to place any trust in him. The Guru has to be totally truthful, and the Shishya has to be totally trustful. It is truth and trust which are the deeper meaning of life that sustains all relationships. Maybe we talk about love and care and giving, that's fine. But even if you don't meet somebody and you know that he's always speaking the truth, then you will never find difficult in relating to him or her. And if you know that somebody trusts you, that's what we feel when Pramukh Swami gives us something to do. There is so much trust that we can't do anything else. When there is so much trust, you don't divert. So ultimately this truth and trust, let me explain it with a simple example. I think that might be better. There was a huge karate master. He was a martial arts master. And one disciple goes to him and said, Master, please teach me karate. And he says, lesson number 1, for 6 months ask me no questions. I think in our schools we encourage questions, correct? Don't do this because I'm telling you it's a different world. Alright? So he says, lesson number 1, don't ask me questions for 6 months. He said, alright, because he had heard all these lectures saying, yeah, Guru-Shishya relationship, I mustn't ask, I must trust, this. So that was heavy in his mind. He said, then what do I do? He said, every morning, there is a boat. It's a very rough river, swift river. You stand erect in that boat. Every morning, I want you to observe the banks. For 1 mile, 1 kilometer, the boat moves. You have to observe the banks. On your return, you observe the banks on the back. So fine. So it's a swift river, rapids. And this person is observing the banks. But how often, if I tell you, for 6 months, observe the wall of your house, it'll drive you mad. I'm like, the same thing, what do I have to do? Observe. But there was great fortune because the leaves would change, the flowers would change, something would happen. He'll see a squirrel, he'll see something falling, he'll see a rapid, he'll see a fish jump up. But that he has to report every night to the Guru. It's the same stuff. After 6 months, this is again sometimes the role of the Guru to see what is your yield point. This is science, Young's modulus. This is your yield point. Okay? So, after 6 months, this boy, he comes to the karate master and says, I'm tired. He said, no, now you will begin. He said, no, but you wasted my time. I was just cruising. I'm just watching. I didn't come down to watch the banks. I didn't come down for a boat ride. I came down for something else. Then the Guru said, you have just learned 2 of the most important factors of martial arts. He said, what? First, to keep balance in fluid conditions. And second, not to realize that you are keeping balance without occupying yourself by keeping balance to observe your surroundings. In martial arts, if you can keep balance and observe your opponent, you will never be defeated. So through truth and trust, if I had told you that you learn the balance, then you will tell me the next day, I have learned balance. If I tell you that you have to observe, the next day you will be tired and saying, I've already observed. We always think we are it. But we are not. The Guru teaches us through trust and truth, and he takes you further, and that's where we understand that the entire process the Guru teaches us is something separate. The fifth thing, which is also most important in a Guru-Shishya relationship, is passion. You'll tell me, Swami, but passion is a part of every relationship. Yeah. I'll tell you, I agree with you. Passion has the power to help you transcend anything, anywhere and everywhere. If you have passion, it takes you beyond. There's a very dear example that I keep very close to my heart when I work. It has been given by Sir Ken Robinson. He's a great educationist from England. Sir, so he's accepted as one of the most important. He gives an example that once a fireman came to him and he told his story which Robinson can never forget. And I hope all of you should not forget. A fireman came to Robinson and he said, Sir, when I was studying in a school, my principal, my guru called me and said, look, you have the best grades. You are scoring over 95, 96 in every subject. You have an academic brain. I suggest that you go down and do PhD, become a professor and become an academician. You have the brains for it. And he said, sir, principal, I want to become a fireman. And the principal lost his cool. Obviously he wasn't a fireman then, so he could have cooled him down. But no, the principal was in a rage. And he said, stupid. You have the brains. Anybody, any Tom, Dick and Harry can become a fireman. But you have the brains for an academician. If you don't become an academician, the world will be losing a great academician. You are over 90, 95 in every subject. Become a doctor, professor. This is my advice, career advice. So he said, but sir, I have a passion to become a fireman. From that day onwards, the principal avoided him. Relations broke. Passions are very difficult. And he started having prejudice for him. He started penalizing him. Despite the fact he scored in his O-levels and A-levels, grade A's and A pluses, he still ended up becoming a fireman. He said after 11 years, once there was a fire in a neighborhood, I ran with my team, and from the residential houses, amongst the first houses, the first person I brought out was my professor and principal. Then his wife, then his daughter. In that smoke-filled air, my principal had tears in his eyes and he told me, son, you were right and I was wrong. If you have passion, you will be in a position to help somebody every time and any time. And even if you don't have passion and if you are in a position, you will still refuse to help everybody every time. You need a passion. So a passion uplifts you and transcends you. But our passion in this world is limited to each other. Spiritual passion, where Guru Shishya have passion for each other, but they also have a passion for higher force, that is God. If both you and husband and wife, if you two have a passion for your parents collectively, then it is going to help you preserve your relationships better. There is somebody who you are looking up to. So in a Guru-Shishya relationship, it only works if both Guru and Shishya have a combined passion for higher being, that is God. Once a Guru who was tired of, bharti thai na jam police ni bharti naam. So many Shishyas wanted to be his Shishya. The Guru said, look, wait a minute, I can't accept everybody. So he said, there is a cave. And you go down into a cave and give just in one line the reason why you want to be with me. Just It's an open test. So the first Shishya went from thousands. He said, oh Guruji, I am sick and tired of this world. And there was nobody in the cave. It was just an echo. And what did he hear? I am sick and tired of this world. He felt even God is like that. So he said, let me go back. The second said, oh God, oh Guru, my family rejects me. What was the echo? My family rejects me. He said, God has the same problem. Let me go. The third guy goes in and he says, oh Guru, I'm an escapist. And I want to run away from the world. What does he hear? I am an escapist. I want to run away from this world. So the Shishya all the Shishyas started going back home because the reason wasn't correct. One came along and he said, oh Guru, I have a passion for you. What was the echo? I have a passion for you. He said, I have a passion for God. What was the echo? I have a passion for God. It is only when the Guru and Shishya have passion for each other and collectively they have a passion for God, that's when the relationship becomes sublime. Love is not looking at each other, but together looking in the same direction. That is love. Yes, you look at each other, but if you don't see the same things in the same way, your relationship starts breaking. So most important is Guru-Shishya relationship is sublime. We know. It has the power to enhance you. But I also want to explore, because we have little time, that why is it so sublime? Let me take you into some science. You never asked me, but let's explore. That the knowledge you get from your Guru, why is it sublime and not the knowledge that we get from normal feelings? Normally, scientists tell us that there is cognitive intelligence. Cognitive intelligence is all the knowledge that we get from our five senses. Eyes, hear, nose, smell, taste and feel. So whatever world we observe is based on these five senses that tell us, let's say for example, a picture. Cognitive intelligence, correct? That's there. But as human beings and those who are alive, we also feel that sometimes we look at the same thing and we feel happy. Sometimes we look at the same thing, we feel sad. Sometimes we hate it. Sometimes we love it. So we understand that there is emotional intelligence. Because yes, cognitive is the same picture. But our emotions for that same situation are different. So beyond cognitive intelligence, there is emotional intelligence. So the picture is black and white, but emotions color it. Fine. But now science also tells us, so sometimes we have emotions, like when an old man is trying to catch a bus and he slips and falls, all the children would laugh. Yeah? But there is moral intelligence now. We start asking whether it's correct to laugh or wrong to laugh. Emotions are there, but whether those emotions are correct, you go to somebody's funeral and you start laughing, then you think, that's morally incorrect, Alright? So I'm saying that just to have cognitive intelligence is not enough. Just to express emotions, having emotional intelligence is not enough. You must have moral intelligence. What is correct and what is not. You go down to somebody who's ill. He's on his deathbed and you start shouting. He said, give me my $200 back. You took it from me. I think that's not correct. You can't pick a fight during somebody's marriage. I'm just trying to say, so there is this moral intelligence that tells us that some emotions are correct and some are not. But there is a fourth, which is known as spiritual intelligence. When sometimes you feel that this is correct, sometimes you feel your emotions are correct, sometimes you feel morally you are correct, but spirituality tells you, no. It is irresponsible for society and your being. See, cognitive intelligence is what we see. Emotional intelligence is what we feel. Moral intelligence is what we think, and spiritual intelligence is what we are. So, sometimes, if your father in front of 20 people, he wrongly shouts at you. You know, cognitive, you heard it. The shout was there. Emotions, you were hurt. You were there. Morally, you feel you have a right to silence him. Morally, you are correct. But spiritually, you know, just tolerate it. Because that makes you you and not an automaton. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? That's why when Akshardham was attacked, cognitive, we were attacked. Emotionally, we were hurt. Morally, everybody said that you can't forgive such a thing. But spiritually, Pramukh Swami said, forgive and move ahead. That's why we could build another Akshardham in Delhi and also in America. It gives you your identity. And it is because of this spiritual intelligence that Guru has the power to give you. It does micromanagement of your soul and your values. And I think in this age you will be able to easily understand what I'm trying to say. Guru can fine-tune your micro world, and in fine-tuning your micro world, you tend to tune your macro world. This micro and macro, only a Guru can have an impact. He can reach to that level. You know, we live in an age of nanotechnology, where a little modification of a molecule can give you a paint. Nani dabbi ma paint છે ને, આખા ઘરને ચાલી જશે. Because of nanotechnology, you will have glass that clean themselves. Because of nanotechnology, you will have toilets, self-cleaning toilets. And I believe the biggest blessing would be self-cleaning houses. Most of the housewives will be free. I'm telling you, nanotechnology, because of slight modification at a nano level, a huge macro difference happens. Correct? What is genetic engineering? Because of genetic engineering, a slight modification of a gene can free you of disease, will rid the world of epidemics. Small, micro, milli, even the smallest change. Now we live in a world of stem cells. And what are stem cells? I just met a stem cell engineer and he told me, the Swami, soon blood donation would be a myth of the past. A little introduction of stem cells and your body will be producing blood naturally. There won't be any pricks and no blood donation necessary. Stem cells technology, a slight change. They are also on the verge of discovering that a little injection of stem cells in your heart and the heart regrows itself. All this knowledge has come from, little insects which regrow their legs or abdomen, things like that. They have learnt it from there. Stem cells technology. So I believe you would support me when I say a change at a nano level or a genetic level or a micro level has the power to affect the change at macro level. This is what the Guru does. In his presence, it is almost like spiritual engineering. In his presence, your thoughts change. In his presence, your values change. And because of a different thought pattern and a set of values, you change and you will be able to make a difference anywhere. And I believe this is true. Why? Perhaps you have heard of the name Carl Jung, the famous psychiatrist and psychologist, a Swiss psychiatrist. He is the founder of analytical psychology. Over his years, for more than 40 years, he treated thousands and thousands, over 50,000 patients from all developed nations of the world, talking to them, taking them out of depression, adjusting their mind, trying to solve psychiatric problem. And do you know what he writes? Listen to this. This is amazing. What Carl Jung writes, that yes, he helped people overcome darkness in his time. But he says, in my moment of darkness, I could have wished for nothing better than a real live Guru. Someone possessing superior knowledge and ability, who could have disentangled for me the involuntary creations of my imaginations. If Carl Jung feels that the Indian concept of the Guru, a Western psychologist, is the right way of coming out of your problems, of your own emotional darkness, so we believe that our Guru can do these micro fine adjustments. Right from a personal problem, personal darkness, to an emotional darkness which Arjun faced. You've already known, I don't want to go into it. He was emotionally distraught. And what did Krishna do? All he did was fine-tune his emotions. And Krishna never left. Till Arjun said, Shishyaste ham shadhi mam tvam prapannam. Arjun kept arguing. When he said, I am your Shishya, that's when he became peaceful. And when he became peaceful, Krishna said, Yathechasi tatha kuru. Now you do what you like. After he got him around, then he says, now you do what you like. He didn't say it right at the beginning of the Gita. So the Guru has this habit from your personal emotional darkness to also national and social darkness. Perhaps it's a very appropriate time I'm talking about. Go down to Arthashastra, and in the books Chanakya, he says the Guru has the capacity of meeting your emotional problems, your personal problems, but also social and national. Chanakya is talking to his Sishyas, is a class discussion. He says that what should a king do after he conquers a kingdom? The Sishyas are puzzled. Chanakya says that how far can a single man reach? How much can a single man see? The first thing a king should do is to appoint ministers. Then the Shishyas ask that who should we appoint ministers into? Chanakya says, you tell me. So the Shishyas say that we will make our friends into ministers. Chanakya says, because they are your friends, they will not listen to you. Then the Shishyas says, okay, we will make our relatives into ministers. He says, because they are your relatives, they will not stop seeking favors. You see what's going around? Then they say that, okay, we will make people who are in need into ministers. Chanakya says, need produces greed. You won't be able to control them. Then the Shishya says, okay, we will make intellectual people into ministers. He says, that is one virtue with many bad vices. Intellectuals feel they are beyond and above everything. You know. So then they say, okay, we will make people who are loyal to our family into ministers. And Chanakya says, simple loyalty breeds slavery. Slaves can't be ministers, we need masters. Then the Shishyas tell Chanakya, okay, we will train new young people, educate them and make them ministers. Chanakya says, education alone with no experience will become disastrous. So the Shishya says, we'll make nobody into ministers. Chanakya says, make all of them into ministers, but listen to none of them. He says, make all of them into ministers, but listen to none of them. Only listen to a spiritual person who does not want power, who is selfless, who is beyond this material world, and who is totally spiritual and transcends this world. Listen to him and listen to nobody else. He believed that a real spiritual person does not only have the power to solve your emotional questions, he has the power to guide throughout, even in social problems throughout the world. From micro to macro. Why a guru can accommodate everything? And the reason is simple. The crunch comes here. In our worldly relationship, we have to relate to other people. In a guru-shishya relationship, the shishya has no power to relate to the guru. It's too beyond. Tena vrunutena. It is when the guru graces, whom the guru selects. If you think that you can manipulate and go to a guru and say, okay, let's strike a relationship, that's not the way in a real guru-shishya. In the fake, fine. in a real, genuine, it's not possible. So in a Guru-Shishya relationship, it's the Guru that comes to the level of the Shishya to relate to him. Why do we in Hinduism believe that God incarnates on this earth? Because God takes a human birth so we can relate to Him. It is self-evident that God makes an effort to relate to us, and we are all happy in thinking that we are relating to God. It's a total misnomer. It's the Guru who becomes a friend because he can micromanage everything. It's the Guru who becomes a father. It's the Guru who becomes the guide. And it's the Guru who sometimes reveals himself as the God. I'm very clear in these issues when I'm talking to you. There are 4 incidents very close to my heart. I will just reveal them very quickly. The friend. Somewhere in 1974, there was a young youth, only 22 years old, in Ahmedabad. He found out that his Guru, Pramukh Swami Maharaj, had come to Shahibagh temple. I'm talking about incident about 50 years back. He got onto his bicycle and he sped the bicycle to the Shahibagh temple. On reaching the temple, he was so disheartened, he found that Pramukh Swami had just left. Little boy, 22, energetic, his desire was to get a glimpse. So he got back on his bicycle just to get a glimpse of his Guru. He started speeding. To his surprise, when he took a turn towards Dilli Darwaja, somehow, even at that time, somebody had stopped the traffic. And when the traffic had been stopped, Pramukh Swami's car was already stopped near the crossroads. This boy, he was delirious with happiness. So he took his bicycle close. Pramukh Swami opened the window of the car. Once he had opened the window, this boy went straight close. He jumped off his bicycle, and started prostrating in the middle of the road. After 4 or 5 prostrations downwards, when he came close to the window and put his head near Pramukh Swami, Swami blessed him with the right hand. To his shock and surprise, he saw that all the while he had left his bicycle alone, with the left hand, Pramukh Swami had been holding the bicycle in balance for all these 5 minutes. This boy, he was so overcome with tears, he said, for him at that time that bicycle was new. The bicycle was the world. And he said that while he was in emotional fit doing something, his Guru had been holding his world together. This incident happened to Kiran Pitwa. I don't know whether he's present here or not, but this incident happened to him. For 50 years, he holds on to this incident thinking that my Guru is my best friend. It's enough. It's a sadhana. It's enough. So Guru has the power to reduce himself to being a friend for life. But there is another incident which is another surprising. In 1991, Guru also has the power to be an ideal father. In 1991, we were in America. And I believe you are a very close family, so I'm going to reveal. I'll also tell you the secrets which I'm not supposed to say, okay? BAPS, we were holding the festival, Cultural Festival of India in America, New Jersey. I was a part of the team that was organizing. So we had decided that every Indian who has made a difference in America, call him, let's felicitate him. So whether it was, some Dr. O.P. Mathur, or, some great designer, some person who has reached great heights in Washington. So all these Indians who had made a difference. In my list, there came a name. The name was Ronald Patel. It's obviously, he's a Patel, so he's Indian. And perhaps he might have been among the first to reach America. So this name came, Ronald Patel, and to my surprise, he was a Pulitzer Prize winner in journalism. He was the managing editor of Philadelphia Inquirer, whose circulation was more than 1 million. The Sunday edition of Philadelphia Inquirer, Ravi Purti, is 1,000 pages. I'm just trying to tell you, I'm just trying to put it in the frame that you understand. I'm diverting, but still. Ronald Patel was the editor of Philadelphia Inquirer. I said, okay, this is the guy. We didn't know. So this is like, we didn't invite everybody we knew. Let's say, let's call him his Cultural Festival of India. We wrote an invitation, 1, 2, 3, no response. I picked up the phone and called, and he said, pure American accent. He said, whoever you are, I'm not an Indian. My father came to America in 1900. He got married to an American woman. My mother is an American. I am a pure American. In my 43 years of life, I have not met more than 5 Indians. But I just happen to carry the surname of my father as a memory, not as a pride. So please leave me out of this festival. I am not an Indian. I said, but you have a name. I said, you carry a name which is famously Indian. I said, then you just try and come. So he didn't come on our invitation. It's later I found out he came on his own out of curiosity. He came with his daughter, who told him, Dad, I find this weird. Okay? He had grown up with guns and blood in Detroit, Ronald Patel. And he made great advances in the journalism field. But the first time he came, his wife had warned him that, Ron, be aware of the Indian gurus. Their one hand will be on your head, the other in your pocket. Let's be open. So even we need to learn. So we are saying, so his wife had told him this. This is Ron Patel, then telling me later on. He came down, and obviously when he saw the festival, he became interested. He came down and met me. He started calling me Young Swami. Okay, he didn't even have time or knowledge of a name. He said, Young Swami. So he came down. The first time I said, will you have time just to meet Pramukh Swami, even 5 minutes? He said, okay. He sat down. And the first impression when he met Pramukh Swami, I was there. After Pramukh Swami left, he said, can you please stop the car for a while? I said, why? He said, my father died when I was 3. But I somehow get a feeling that I see my father in him. I see my father in him. So I stopped Pramukh Swami's car. We ran up and said, Swami, આને એવો અનુભવ થાય છે કે તમારામાં એના પિતા દેખાય છે. I said it in Gujarati. સ્વામી કે ગુજરાતનો છે ને એટલે. Most simple. I'm just being very honest now, So Swami said, ગુજરાતનો છે ને. તો સ્વામી કે એને કહો કે ક્યારે દેશમાં આવ્યા છે? દેશ. So I said, have you ever come to India? He said, no, never, and I don't want to. My wife doesn't want to. My mother doesn't want to. I said, why? He said, because when my dad died, people from India kept writing to my mother that you preserve his bones. And that she found evil. They thought there was some evil spirit. So they broke all relations with India in somewhere in 1950s. Total, and there's no more relation. He said, so I would rather go to the pyramids than India. He said that straight away to Swami. Swami said, have you ever wondered, Swami, કે તમે journalist છો. છાપાવાળા તો સંશોધન કરે ને. સ્વામી કે આખા દુનિયાનું સંશોધન કરો છો તો તમારું કર્યું? You do research on everything. Have you done research on your roots? He said, but I don't know where I come from in India. Swami said, you come to India once, I will find your roots. Ron writes in an article that I was dumbfounded. Here is somebody I've never met. First time I'm meeting, suddenly he tells me, you come to India with a guarantee that I will find your roots. Then came 1992 when we were opening the Gandhinagar Akshardham. We were all sitting and we were thinking, who should we invite? Pramukh Swami normally doesn't take interest in everything. All of us sadhus, they decide and then we go and present it to Swami. We all had decided, that it's not always safe and wise to call reporters. Right? So we decided, collectively said, okay, Ron Patel, no, we don't need to call him. And he doesn't have much feelings anyway for India or us. When we were sitting with Pramukh Swami and we gave all this list, Swami straight away asked, I'm a witness. Swami said, Pela, chapawada no su thyu? I said, એનું નથી કરવાનું. સ્વામી કે આપણે વચન આપ્યું છે કે એનું મૂળ શોધી આપશો. A guru gives you a promise and he worries about that promise. He doesn't need reminder letters or memos. And Swami said, બોલાવો. I said, Swami, but પણ ક્યાં? Swami કે બોલાવો, ભગવાન સારું કરશે. God will do good. What happened? I phoned up Ron. And he was more shocked. He said, you're still calling me from India? I said, this is India. You can read this. I will give you an internet site. You can read this, what he has written. He said, you are still calling me from India? I said, this is India. I said, remember that, our Guru had said he'll find your roots? He said, I know, but he asked his wife. Everywhere there's the same issue. He writes, he asked his wife, and Kathy, his wife, said, Ron, there's no harm in just popping into a plane and just going down there. You'll just find something new. Just go. I said, okay. He came down in 1992. Pramukh Swami, because he has moved through more than 15,000 villages. He knows almost all villages on his hand. Villages I'm talking about, not cities. And he said, you ask around in the towns near Baroda, and there was a village called Mehdad. There, when our volunteers went, they found out that there was a 96-year-old man. His name was Ranchod Bhai. And he was on his dying bed. He remembered his entire story of Chotu Bhai, who was given special condition by Gayakwad. He was a great, intelligent person. He had left for England. From England, he had gone down to America, and they had 18 letters of Chotu Bhai writing from America saying that I have married, I am there. All those letters came out, preserved by this 96-year-old man who was this fellow's best friend. Now look at the coincidences. I told Ron, I said, we found it. He said, I'm on. He came down, and when we took him to that village, Mehdad, the love and hospitality in our villages is instant. They don't need lectures. It's instant. And he was received so well. He was so moved. And now I know, because he was a Patel, he writes in his memoir that the moment I stood foot on a little farm and I asked that how long has our family been owning this? And they said 600 years. He says, suddenly I felt proud. Because he was a Patel, because village, town and land. So, he said, he writes, and then he was so moved. He came down to Pramukh Swami and he said, put these beads around my neck, Kanti. He's not a Swaminarayan. It still goes further. He was a journalist, the editor of Philadelphia Inquirer. Okay? He went home. In 1993, on Father's Day, the entire Philadelphia Inquirer has been devoted to his visit of Pramukh Swami, a spiritual father who found my father. And in that, he has written his entire story. You can go out on the net and find out. Slowly, Swami gave a rosary to Ron. He came down in 95, then in 2000. No, he came down to 95, then 98. So he met Pramukh Swami on and off. He's a person who has interviewed presidents and prime ministers. He was trying to understand Pramukh Swami. He wasn't not the Swaminarayan. But he left meat because of his dedication. Okay? And totally American. Just the name Patel. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Once, this is the biggest thing that has touched me. Once, in the year 1999, somewhere around in December, Ron called me. We had become very good friends. He said, young Swami, can I talk to Pramukh Swami? I said, he's in a village in Bochasan, and I don't think you'll be able to talk to him. Because there will be nobody interpreting. You don't understand Gujarati, and he doesn't understand English. He said, just give me his number. Fine, I gave him his number. I don't know what he said, what Pramukh Swami told him, and he said he wanted to talk to Pramukh Swami directly. No interpretation, not even me. Nobody. Then, on 1st January 2000, 1st January 2000, there was a message on my answering machine. If anybody comes down to the mandir, I can make you listen to that message. I have preserved it. The message was from Ron. He spoke to me saying, young Swami, I am in a hospital, suffering from liver cirrhosis. I didn't tell you, but the doctors have told me I do not have long to live. And I am going to die soon. I know I don't understand Gujarati, but I wanted to hear Swami Shri's voice. Listening to his voice makes death so much more comfortable. And on 7th January, he died. I want to tell you what is a father. A father is a person who gives you identity. Swami gave him his identity. A father is somebody who takes you back to your roots. Pramukh Swami took him. A father who has open arms and welcomes you in all your problems. A father is a person who gives you security in your most difficult moments. And nothing is more difficult than death. The Guru can take care of your birth and also takes care of your death. This is a role that a Guru plays with everybody. So a Guru can reduce himself to a friend, can grow into your father, can become the guide. When President Kalam came to Pramukh Swami and said that 500 thinkers and scientists, he has written this in Ignited Minds, 500 thinkers and scientists have thought of how to develop India in 2020. We have thought of 5 areas. One is education and health. Second is information and communication. Third is agriculture. Fourth is infrastructure. And fifth is critical technology. He said, if India develops in these 5 areas, we would be a successful nature. Kalam writes, instantly Pramukh Swami said, what about spirituality? Unless people are spiritual and they adhere to your dreams, you will never fulfill your dreams. And even if you do development, if the people are not morally and spiritually pure, they will not continue with these dreams. So Kalam writes that Swami could guide him and the people in a way for national development as well. So Guru is not just a person, he just talks about religion. He has to talk about life, the entire spectrum. So the Guru is a friend, is a father, is a guide. But the ultimate experience of the Guru-Sishya relationship is when you experience God in that Guru. Guru is not God, but you experience nothing but God. When you see your wedding ring is not your wife. But when you look at the wedding ring, you can think of nothing else but your wife. When you see a picture of your father is not your father. It's just paper. But when you look at that picture, you can think of nothing else but your father. Similarly, when you look at your Guru, you should think of nothing else but God. Guru is not God, but he effuses the presence of God. It is said that when God wants to relate to you, he wears the Guru's mask. He wears the Guru's mask when God wants to relate to you and reach out to you. And this experience is not limited. If I say Pramukh Swami is limited to the Swaminarayan Sampradaya, I don't understand him. If I say he's just for me, it's totally wrong. This last incident is really surprising, and it's very difficult to understand how this could happen. The last thing that Guru reveals himself, the energies of spirituality and God, it's very important that we understand that is totally different. I will explain that Guru sometimes takes you into a transcendental world which is beyond whatever your expectation is. What happens? That there is a doctor in Bahrain, his name is Dr. Faisal Jira. He's a committed Shia Muslim. He's the director of Bahrain International Hospital, Middle East. He himself sometimes invites sadhus to speak. Once he invited me to speak at his hospital, when 99% all were obviously Muslim doctors. We have nothing like that. So I had gone down to speak. Suddenly after my speech, Dr. Jira got up. And he told everybody that all of you are probably wondering what a saffron-clad Hindu monk is doing in our hospital and speaking about spirituality. He said, it's an experience I have got from his guru, Pramukh Swami. Now what Jira has said. He said, in our Quran, and our Imams tell us that there are special people around whom angels dance. There are special people. He said, has anybody ever seen angels dancing around some spiritually heightened people? And everybody said, no. But it is there in our Quran? They said, yes. It is there in our scriptures? They said, yes. He said, I'll tell you my experience that once Jira is married to an Austrian lady. He said, once when I took my car, a Rolls Royce, and I was standing outside at the airport to receive Pramukh Swami. When I saw him coming out of the airport, first time in my life I saw angels dancing around a person. And he sat in my car just once in 1997. And from 1997 to this date, me and my wife have refused to sell that car to anybody because it is spiritually potent. He said that I believe that all religions lead to God. Dr. Jira is saying all religions lead to God. And I believe that our paths are different, destination is one. But I also want to add that yes, all religions lead to God, but perhaps the widest and the most comfortable path to God is the path shown by Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Nobody told him. It's a deep experience, and even now when you go to his office is about half the size of this hall. I'm honestly telling you, half the size of this hall, Dr. Jira. In his office there are only two pictures. One of his father and one of Pramukh Swami Maharaj, Dr. Faisal Jira. He's not a Swaminarayan. But you don't have to be a Swaminarayan to connect to a right guru. All these things are there for convenience. A real guru is universal. It's like if I ask you, what nationality is the sun? Is it Indian, American, Japanese, Chinese? The sun is universal there for those who want to see light. If I ask you what color is air, is it black, brown? There is no color for air. There is no race. If I ask you what caste is water, lower, higher, water is there for those who are thirsty. If I ask you what race does space belong to? Human race? No. Just as all the 5 basic elements of the universe are universal, even the entity of Guru is universal. He is beyond the race, the time, the color, the caste, the country that divides us. A real Guru has to be universal. And when you put trust in such a real Guru, then you see the face of God in that Guru. Because that's when the transformation occurs. Like I had said in the beginning, the Guru-Shishya relationship is not informational but transformational. What happened with Narad and Valmiki? Narad was the Guru. He told him the truth. He had the power to tell Valya Lutaro that you are sinning. Do you think anybody could have told him and lived? No, the Guru can't. Okay? The latest Harvard research, 2011 in Harvard Business School, is written by, the research has been written by Professor Bill George or somebody like that. And in that research he writes, why do leaders lose their way? He says, leaders sometimes feel that they are like heroes that people have to follow. They forget they have to serve the people that follow them. He also says the leaders become so confident, they become so high that nobody can tell the truth. Leaders have to keep people who can tell them the truth. The guru can. So here, Naradji told Valio Lutaro, the robber, that you are sinning. Valio trusted him. Truth and trust, they come back again. And because he trusted him, there was transformation. The guru has the power to improve all your relations because he transforms you. And you know what happened? Valio Lutaro, who was the most feared, became the most revered. Does he have any problems of relationship now? We still relate to Valmiki now. Because Guru transformed Valio, that you will be able to have relationships with everyone in the world properly. If there is a spark of transmission. So at the end, all I can tell you, that the sublime bonds of Guru-Shishya relationship has the power to change your micro-environment and the macro. It takes you from isolation, connection, relation to contemplation, where it's like spiritual Wi-Fi. You just think and you connect. I think in this world you'll be able to understand. Your Guru is as alive as you keep him. Somebody might have a Guru in 1900, but if you think of him, he can reach out across space-time. That's the Guru. But if you have a Guru, you are all Ahmedabadis. I am just requesting a little investment of time and energy in your Guru will pay back great dividends. This example may not be appropriate, but the thought is, please bear me out. You might have heard of the name Baron Rothschild. The greatest bankers, amongst the greatest financiers of Europe in the early 19th and 20th century. It's a whole family of great financiers. Their wealth combined was equated as, comparatively, would be 5 times more than Bill Gates today. Baron Rothschild. There were bankers who saved countries, nations, European countries, many times when they were in financial crisis. And the Austrian king gave them royalty status. So did Queen Victoria. So they got the status of baron. Once you become royal, you have palace and you have all the flutter and the glamour and the glitter. Your tastes begin to change. So this Baron Rothschild, he decided to decorate his entire palace with his pictures. One in an army, sometimes on a horse, sometimes hunting, sometimes working, all pictures of Baron Rothschild. There was only one picture he didn't have, was him as a beggar. Raja Vaja Nevandra. So he decided, I need to know how would I look if I was a beggar. So he got the best artist of France in Paris. They went to a very derelict street. He had to stand there for 4 hours, dressed as a beggar, with all weakness, hungry. For 2 days he fasted. He has to look reality, though it's a picture. He had a begging bowl, and he was just waiting like that while the other guy was painting across the street. While he was waiting with the begging bowl, like a beggar, a passerby was so moved by this pitiable beggar, he took out a franc and put it in the bowl. It's embarrassing and insulting for a baron, to be given a single franc. So, but he could not move. Somebody was sketching him, so he got his attendants. He says, follow him and find out where he lives. So these guys followed him. They found out his address. After a month, Baron Rothschild issued 100,000 francs to that man. That man was surprised. He said, but what do I get this 100,000 francs? Why? He said, a month back, did you put a single franc in some beggar's bowl? He said, yeah, but I do it to every now and then, every beggar. He said, well, that was not the beggar, that was the baron. Though You put in a franc thinking he was a beggar. The baron knew he was a baron, so he has given you reward in a way that befits a baron. Though you may relate to a guru like a friend, or a father, or a guru, but the guru knows he has God in him, so he will definitely reward you with God. It doesn't matter how you reward to him. I pray today that the biggest reward you could have given me was praying for Pramukh Swami. And Swami is 92. He's resting in Ahmedabad. Presently, his health is fine. But please continue to pray for his health. It will be the greatest gift you could give me. And as I was leaving the Ahmedabad temple, I went to Dr. Swami. Dr. Swami is a very senior enlightened sadhu. He told me that you tell everybody that even if you don't have a spiritual guru, you have your parents as your guru. Begin your day by Panchang Pranam to your father or mother. Don't be too big for the parents who made you. If your parents are not alive, bow down to their picture. And Dr. Swami commanded me that you show everybody how they should do Panchang Pranam. So do it to the audience. I will fulfill his smallest wish with this incident. Thank you very much.